Episode number 82 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. My guest today is Chiemi Rajamahendran. Chiemi, the founder of Misconception Coach, is an infertility support counselor that offers individual and couple support sessions in person and through teletherapy worldwide. Chiemi has experience with various support environments, specializing in infertility, trauma, and loss. Her support is tailored to those experiencing stress and anxiety related to infertility and loss, related to procedures such as IVF and IUI. She provides private peer support groups and an online community to support those on their fertility journey. So welcome to the podcast, Chiemi.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. Thank you.
So can you share your background, how you got inspired to train and specialize as an infertility support counselor?
Sure. Yeah. It's been, it's in 2015. That was sort of the launch date really of the whole Instagram community.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, it was my education was communications and psychiatric nursing. So I had a little bit of environments that had women's health, and I was at Planned Parenthood for a while. There's kind of an emergency crisis line, and then I started to go into kind of preconception, and then it was really the combination of being in that environment and experiencing my own journey of loss, and really just being in a system that left a lot of women feeling really alone in those moments of grief, going through miscarriages and all of these sort of taboo topics that we kind of go through by ourselves, literally in that moment of being at a hospital and being sent home. And it's really just, finding yourself at home alone with your spouse, or even sometimes when it's just you, and how, in that real time moment needing support. And there really wasn't anything like that. And that's kind of where I started just reaching out at a online presence with some community and some Facebook groups, and just saying, hey, we're here, and this is, you don't have to feel alone in that moment. And it slowly just started from that sort of sense of community to now a full-time practice of doing infertility, trauma and loss counseling for individuals and couples. Mm-hmm. So that's my daily, just kind of balancing those things. And now our groups are peer-led, which is amazing, because we have, years worth of women and a community that is now able to give back to each other, which has been phenomenal.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
So people in the community that have gone through the trauma and are coming back and supporting other women going through this. And couples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from 2015, we kind of built up this grassroots sort of online presence, and now actually this year I'm trying to do more face-to-face clients and just sort of be more of a local presence as well. But the Facebook groups are really built up of women that we have 3 separate ones, because it kind of evolved from, just women trying and talking about infertility and treatment, to then those people, their journeys ending and growing in different ways. Mm-hmm. And we realized we can't just have one huge group. And if you follow me on Instagram, I'm super tight about triggers and making sure that it's a safe space. Yeah. So with our groups, we do have everything just centralized into what your experience is in the moment. If you're trying right now, if you've gone on and got pregnant and now it's more of a motherhood realm of, infertility mixed with secondary infertility, or mixed with just being a new mom and the pregnancy aspect. And then there's also a group we started last year that just talks about, after that, and what it looks like to say, I've moved on to a different focus, and it's not around treatment. It's not around, pregnancy or anything related to fertility. It's just kind of finding where my voice is again. And that's been a really interesting, new kind of aspect of it too, which I think is great. A lot of that's coming out these days. And I think it's so important to have all three there for people, because they do need them at every aspect of their life.
Yeah. And so basically you have three different groups that cater to three different really areas of the journey. Mm-hmm. So one is trying, another one is, actively trying and going through the disappointments and the IVF and IUIs. And the other one is loss, pregnancy loss. And the third one, go ahead.
I would say the main one is, the misconception coach is mainly the voice that we speak about is just the, being in the middle of that journey and still kind of just in the trenches. Right. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is called Bump to Bottles. And that's really just about what it's like to be on the other side of infertility now that you're newly pregnant. And then those women have baby or toddlers now that are 4 and 5 that have started kind of at the original 2015 community. So that It's been pretty amazing. And they help with the peer support of knowing that other side and understanding the complexities of that and being there for someone, because as there's so many variables when it comes to how it unfolds for you, surrogacy and embryo adoption and I mean, just, the list is endless. So it's finding someone else that actually has your exact journey it's an amazing bond, but unbelievable. There is so much of that. And someone would be like, oh, I'm going through embryo and surrogacy adoption and all of that stuff. And then they kind of just peer support each other, which is amazing.
That's wonderful. And I think it's so necessary because I've heard so many things, so many comparisons to PTSD and fertility challenges. And also not only, even if a person goes on and has kids and everything ends up being the way they wanted it to work out, they still feel those symptoms.
Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that, has evolved in our understanding of, once you do fall pregnant, how I have a lot of clients that are just still in such shock that they have really a hard time bonding with the pregnancy and what that reality is that's happening to them, because they're pushed into IVF and our other treatments so quickly, and they're all back to back. And then all of a sudden, they're pregnant, and the anxiety, obviously, that goes along with just early first trimester and just all of the other health issues that are on top of that usually they usually have too. That's kind of a really kind of a rude awakening for most people, because they're like, well, I'm sitting in, I have the prize mentality and I don't know how to enjoy that yet. And I don't know how to bond and be in that mindful space quite yet. And we kind of work through that of not having to rush and not forgetting what you've been through and kind of catching up to, like you said, literally the trauma of what years of that has done to you, and how you work through that and kind of get to a place that feels safer.
And it sounds like there's so much healing that comes from giving it a name. Because you had mentioned, with pregnancy loss back in the day, or it was even not that long ago, there was not really a platform or a space for it where people understood what these women are going through, and just to give it an acknowledgement and a name, just that alone makes you feel as a person validated.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, we started using the word infertility trauma about a year ago, and I it's so important that people have that sort of validation of their feelings. And even, I wrote a piece yesterday about someone asked me to write about pregnancy loss, and I am the voice of talking about the grief and loss around fertility treatments that are not successful, because that is such a space where people don't feel validated in that grief,
Yeah.
because a lot of people don't understand that that's a real loss for them. It's felt on the same level, and similar grief, obviously, as any other pregnancy loss, but because
Yeah.
our society doesn't validate, oh, you just did IVF and you're just going to try again. Like, that's
Yeah.
such a dismissive reality of what their experience actually was, and the bond that they had with the embryo, the baby, like what they
Right.
felt, and the love, and the future that they envisioned. All of those are losses. And so that's the voice that we keep trying to acknowledge and validate. And yeah, it's been amazing that so many people are able to kind of heal once that validation is there, and once people say, okay, I understand why you're grieving still, or that you're upset and you're working through all of this stuff. And that through that, validation, you're able to kind of move into a new space of healing, which is so necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that I find, and I've heard a lot from people, is the group therapy and actually connecting with the community is so important, because there's so much power and healing in stories.
Yeah, the whole sort of, having a space that just gets it, and you don't have to explain, and you don't have to sort of feel like you have to fight your way into being there, and acknowledgement of, worth of being there is so important.
Yeah.
And in understanding sort of kind of, what support is, because a lot of times you're left feeling like people that are closest to you are not able to support you the way you need it. Your
Right.
mom, your sister, your brother, your spouse. That can start to feel very isolating, when you're going through loss and a lot of painful emotions. So
Right.
finding a space that just gets it,
Yeah.
and where you can just vent and just, exchange kind of stories about what you've been through. And it's wonderful to have that sense of community.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you touched upon a point which I hear often, is that women and men handle this process very differently. A lot of times, they just process it differently. They have a different language. And that tends to be, it tends to make at least one person feel like they're not heard or understood throughout the
Mm-hmm.
process. So, what are some ways that you've had or spoken to people about working through that?
Yeah, it's so true. Just in any relationship, without even the infertility aspect, obviously, men and women, we have different love languages, and different
Yeah.
ways of expressing our needs and our wants. But in couple sessions, we talk a lot about, what it means to experience the same trauma per se, but still our actual response to it is so different. And we
Yeah.
acknowledge the truth of a woman's experience of the physical body is so different than a support system. And sometimes, we really have to acknowledge the woman needs to hear that from a partner, that I appreciate what you've sacrificed. Your body
Right.
has sacrificed.
Yeah.
You can't, let's not pretend it's the same. And that's okay. We're not trying to say one is more or anything in that sort of realm, but it's more acknowledgement goes a long way, of a spouse saying, thank you for sacrificing your body. Thank you for putting needles in your
Yeah.
body. Thank you for taking medication. And that breakthrough, when you hear it, is really powerful, because sometimes, thank you goes a long way in feeling, kind of connected to each other. And so when someone says and acknowledges, yeah, thank you for sacrificing your body and doing this for our family, that we're trying to make. And it's nice to see people asking, well, how can I support someone in that experience? And a lot of times the spouse is, it's better just to mirror emotions that you see, and versus trying to fix the
Right.
emotion that you see. And so we talk about, different tools that you can use on a day to day when you're seeing a partner that's obviously still full of grief, and suggesting, hey, you should do this, or you should try this, or why are you so down all the time? And that puts a lot of pressure on someone that's trying to heal.
Right.
So taking that, it's also stressful for the spouse too, because they want to help, and they often say things like, well, it hurts me to see you upset, or how can I help you? And sometimes we have to realize that support can just mean giving space when needed, and just mirroring the emotion and validating and listening. So those are the kind of the key things that we talk about and work on for relationship dynamics, really.
Yeah. And another thing too that is very common is friends getting pregnant and having to go through that, and having to be invited to showers. I mean, it's like torture.
Those triggers are so hard, aren't
That's
they?
tough.
Yeah, that's really tough. And one thing that that we try to really look at is, okay, what when I do get triggered, instead of making myself feel like a horrible, ugly monster because I felt jealous, or I felt envy, or I felt just frustration and anger, that it's okay to feel those things. And it's not, grief is not about you or your character as a person.
Right.
These emotions are coming out because it's all just part of normal grief processing, to have crazy fears, to have what if questions, to kind of spiral into that sort of, should I have done this? And that's all normal, and it's okay. And those need to just kind of come out and be heard, and not to place so much shame on yourself for feeling those.
Yeah.
So, when you do get triggered, it's never really about that actual person, right? It's never about you and me. It's not even a personal connection when we're scrolling through Instagram or Facebook. It's just the visual and what that triggers inside of you. And it's usually stems back from, you're just completely depleted emotionally, mentally, and you're feeling not seen, and your validation in what you need is not there, and your boundaries usually need to be tightened. And that's another thing that we talk about. The only way to really help with all of those triggers and those feelings is to make sure your boundaries are really set tight.
Yes, absolutely. And I've spoken to somebody who said, you know what, it's okay. You don't have to go to places. You can say no. Such a good point that you bring up is that you're so depleted that it's okay if you don't have it in you to feel happy for somebody. If you're exhausted, I mean, where are you going to come up with those emotions?
Totally. And, if we looked at ourselves or our stories from a third person perspective, they always say, well, what would a friend say to you right now? And it's true. You would say, oh my gosh, that you're going above and beyond what should be emotionally expected of somebody. But a lot of times obviously that reflects a part of us that's a loving, giving person that wants to be there for friends, and that's wonderful. But when you're in trauma, it's you don't have the ability. Like if you broke your leg, you just don't have the ability to say, let's go for a run, let's go do stuff. You have to give yourself that grace and that time to say, if I don't do these things, I can't heal, and you deserve to heal. That's kind of a mantra that you have to keep thinking. And there's only, everyone has to have their own boundaries set depending on, what they're going through. It's all very different. So it really depends on you, but that's so important.
Oh, totally. And then, talking about boundaries, there's also family members and people that say really insensitive things. They're well-meaning, but I think that they don't know what to say, and then they say like the worst possible thing. That happens a lot.
A lot, yeah. And I mean, we all do it too. It's just sometimes, and that's why the awareness is so important. And with any topic, when you will learn more about something, there is that moment of, oh, I've done that before, right?
Yeah,
like it's just, it's natural. We used to ask people, oh, when you guys having kids? And we never thought that such a question could be so heated. But obviously in a context of a different sort of world of infertility and loss, that's a very emotionally heated question. And so it's hard to know exactly what is okay to say to someone, what's not okay. And usually it's from a place of them wanting to take away the uncomfortable situation, or the grief is a lot for people to kind of sit in that sort of space. So they say things like, oh, well, you were just early on, you can try again, or now you can get pregnant, that's a great thing, or just very sort of backhanded comments. But yeah, to the person that's in that scenario, it's really hard not to take it personally. And obviously if it's from someone that's close to you, it really hurts. And we see a lot of damage to relationships, and you kind of get stuck in, well, how do you move through if my best friend is pregnant, or my mom keeps saying these really horrible things, she's trying to be supportive, but they're really triggering. Like, how do we move past so it doesn't affect me so much? And that's kind of where our own mental health comes into play, right? Taking responsibility for our boundaries and self-regulating our own body in response to how that affects us.
Yeah, absolutely. And what tips would you suggest, if somebody's going through something like that, like how because it is such a challenging thing, especially when it comes to family members that you can't necessarily avoid. And even trying to make boundaries or set boundaries doesn't really always work.
No, I know exactly. So it's such a step by step. There's obviously no step by step to healing, but you can put things in place to really curate your day. So I usually get clients to kind of do like a walkthrough of a typical day from when they get up, and take note of things that do trigger them and do make them feel tense. And it's really kind of a body reaction, without judgment. So if you see a friend that texts you, all of a sudden your body's getting tense and nervous and your shoulders are tight. So take note of why. And obviously you are reacting to someone that has said something before, and the trust is gone, and there's a little bit of a trigger there, which is totally fine. So, and then as your day goes on Instagram or Facebook or whatever else, and these are all things that we can take away and limit and really, really stream down to what's, in our life on a daily basis that makes us feel safe enough. I find that, so many people want to add stuff. Okay, what should I do more? And that adds kind of more stress and anxiety. So, taking away 3 or 4 things that really add too much stress and don't help you heal, or that you do find just to be things that cause you that anxiety, that your body reacts to. And would try to do it without judgment. So instead of, you can pause or block that friend or that cousin or whatever that's pregnant or that's posting all of those baby pics, because right now you just don't have that sort of emotional space to really have that effect, when you see them. So it's okay to do all that stuff, to pause and block and delete and as much as you need to.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because it's something that I think some people expect or demand too much of themselves. And sometimes, like you said, it's like you just went through a trauma. You can't expect to run after hurting your ligament or, whatever it is that you just went through.
And it's that voice in our head that always will come up of, making us feel I'm not a nice person, or why am I so jealous still of this, even after years? Why do I still get triggered? And I thought I was over this. And it's just kind of learning that that's all part, and that's healthy and normal. And to keep reminding yourself that you can have a great day, and then the next day you can feel like you've taken 10 steps back because of one small thing that triggered you. And that's okay. That's totally normal. But the more we talk about the reality and the normalcy of all of these emotions and make them not so taboo, the more other people, like, I love when I get messages and say, oh, I thought I was the only one that was feeling like that. It's like, no, we all feel like that. And that stems back to what we said about community and having that bond of saying, yeah, this is normal and it's going to be okay, because, I was once there and I felt all that stuff, and I was, you will slowly come out of that sort of that space. So it's nice to have that anchor and that help.
Yeah,
because
lifeline. If you're going through it and you think you're the only person going through it, then you think something's wrong with you. That's that's the automatic response to that. But then if you realize how can you expect yourself not to feel those feelings? And I also think it's great that you bring up that not to look at it objectively and non-judgmentally. Because I think that what happens is I call it like almost like a second injury. The first injury is the injury of what happened. The second injury is the story we tell ourselves about what happened, and the judgment that we put on ourselves but to come in with a place of compassion
Yeah.
and allowing those feelings to exist because they simply do.
Yeah, that's exactly the right word, compassion. Because there's no bad, there's no right or wrong, it's just your truth. And having to, just the courage to stand inside of your truth and say, because it's not your fault what happened to you. Trauma is not your fault, and those experiences
That's right.
are not your fault. So because it's not your fault, you're left to process how it affected you. And because it's affecting you, you're allowed to say, okay, you know what, this is how I'm going to survive it. This is what I need to do to work through it and to feel like I can, have a bit of a normal reaction, not such a fight or flight kind of reaction. So yeah, understanding that you deserve, and that's really the hardest one, is to keep telling, ourselves, I deserve to heal, I deserve the space,
Mm-hmm.
I deserve the validation right now. And that's really the hardest part, I think, is having that, reminding ourselves of that every day.
Right, and it's such a unique thing in that not everybody understands what you're going through because not everybody goes through that. So that is
Mm-hmm.
where it gets so isolating and confusing. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and that's where the community is so powerful. And it seems to be really more than anything, just being in this field and hearing and interviewing, that's one topic that I always hear is that the community is where so many people have drawn their strength.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the strength of, that sisterhood and that camaraderie. It's so wonderful. Like just seeing the National Infertility Awareness Week a couple of weeks ago, and just, the rally of people that share their stories. There's something definitely, and not everyone wants to come out and
Mm-hmm.
share their story. And that's something that I always make sure to say, is that it's okay to also be a silent supporter. It's okay to be, more personal, because these are
Yeah,
very personal. This
it
is,
is. Yeah, for
when,
sure.
sharing these kind of things with just like a coworker or a friend, that's very personal stuff we're talking about. So there's really a level of vulnerability that you're pushed into. And for some personalities, more so than other, that's an added scary place, because they
Right.
don't really share, let alone
Yeah.
share about their bodies and their cycles, and like, very kind of awkward conversations. And obviously loss is a vulnerable space, in its own. So yeah, having that community, I find with, that people that end up working in counseling and doing sessions, it is that added community plus a one-on-one that
Mm-hmm.
really gives them that space to work through stuff.
Right.
It's a
And
good.
even for those people that don't want to share, just the fact that there are stories out there, from those who have shared, just knowing that somebody else on the planet can relate to it is just there's something so healing
Mm-hmm.
about that. I think that it's definitely for sure very great. And you work with couples and you work individually, couples and in groups, correct?
So yeah, I do individual sessions, and
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes we have couple sessions. The groups are just all peer support now. So I just kind of check in every day with the groups and see what's going on with the moderators. And they do an awesome job at keeping things. I mean, this is such a women. This is they're so lovely. They've been through. They're so empathetic and so
Mm-hmm.
compassionate. This group of people, right? It's so we never
Yeah.
really have any issues with that. It's more just making sure everyone feels included and heard, and keeping an eye on some people, that start to get quite down and scared and anxious. And so that's really nice for checking in once a week and just making sure how everyone's feeling and doing.
Yeah, without a doubt. So are there any coping tools? I mean, you've already shared a lot, but if there's any like other tips or tools that you'd love to share?
Just in regards to, I would say, some tips really, like we did talked about this last week too on another page, and it was something that came up was the same sort of message of, there are no real step-by-step guides to obviously healing, but the main thing is to just keep making sure that you're reminding yourself, to have more compassion and giving yourself that grace and time, because, you know, you can do all the self-care in the world and all the pampering and all the downtime, but if inside it's still not something you feel worthy of, then that gets, you kind of feel
Right.
stuck, and you get stuck in that space.
That's such a good point.
So it's, you know, yeah, we really want you to make sure you're not adding extra stress and extra overwhelm, especially right now with the, you know, just the kind of trauma within trauma right now in the
Yeah.
world. It's obviously a unique time to be experiencing all of these things, and the last month has been really surreal in regards to, you know, coping and people reaching out with their clinics being closed and feeling really alone and isolated.
Yeah.
But that's so self-care and self-compassion while you're kind of isolated inside your house is something that's been a challenge, obviously, but with online, that's obviously something that's so great to have at your fingertips.
Right. Absolutely. And, you know, it is in that sense, obviously the internet has its gifts and curses, you know, all kinds of
Yeah,
different things,
exactly.
but there are amazing gifts and resources because we have an internet. And to know
Mm-hmm.
that you can actually go and learn so much from other people's stories and then find connections and things that you can relate to is really such a great thing.
Yeah, it's a really a lifeline, isn't it, to most people right now, which is thank God.
Especially
Thank
now,
God.
yeah, because
Yeah.
we're in the, you know, the pandemic right now, but it hopefully will lift soon, and but by the time this airs, it'll air like a little later, so who knows by then what's going to happen, but I'm sure it's still going to be very fresh in people's minds.
Yeah, it'll be really fresh, and it'll be a lot of catching up, you know, with just everything, catching up to getting back on a protocol or whatever part of your treatment you're on, and just it's because everyone was really jolted, like in a jarring way of just stop. You know,
Hmm.
it was literally like one day we just kind of woke up and it was everything was closed, and so
Yeah.
that disconnect and that kind of all of a sudden loss of connection that you had, that was one thing that was I, you know, heard from clients the past month. Really, it was just that feeling of sudden shock.
Yeah.
So in this community obviously knows how that feels. This is kind of what people deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Right. That's something that I heard a lot. I mean, it's kind of like the world suddenly faced this unknown, and that women on the fertility journey face all the time. And now it's
Yeah, and
like everybody else is feeling it, but then they're feeling it double.
feeling it, yeah, double. And I think anyone that suffers from any chronic illness or any sort of chronic situation or long-term situation, is really, those communities are the ones that are saying, well, this is, you know, what we always, the unknown is no, is very common to us, and having to wait is common to us, and
Hmm.
you know, feeling unheard and kind of dismissed is also things that we're used to processing. But yeah, now, so there was a sort of a collective understanding of, now people know what we go through all the time, but it's it's hard to reconnect and reestablish trust with people that were supporting you originally, like clinics and doctors and nurses and support systems are sort of trying to reestablish that, which is good. It's given a lot of people a glimmer of hope. So
Yeah,
that's great.
without a
Getting
doubt.
back.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So little by little, you know, it'll
Yes.
eventually come back to life, and hopefully we'll start to treat the earth a little better because now we see some clear skies.
I know there are some silver linings in some of
For
these
sure.
things, and it's nice to a lot of people do, you know, say that, oh, you know, it's been nice just to have not rush anywhere. I mean, that's a huge
Yeah,
one. Just,
that's
yeah,
true.
slowing down a bit, not having to rush, taking time to just sort of think about things that you can control. That's one thing we did last week, was clients made a list of, you know, when they're feeling that anxiety, what can I control right now, what can't I,
Right.
and then we talked about the things that we can, and how they can we can utilize that to feel more centered, a bit more stable, a bit more grounded. That was kind of the key word, was trying to get more grounded in our
Right.
emotions, definitely.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's interesting too because we've been going outside and sometimes walking on the grass. Something like that could actually,
Yes.
just being out in nature can ground you.
Totally. Yeah, the tactileness of kind of feeling safe in trauma is one thing that I love sort of incorporating, because I think as kids, it was just we were very in tune to that. We had, blankets, and we had soft things, and we had just comfort levels of how to self-regulate. And as
Right,
we matured and got older, we sort of thought we didn't need them anymore, and we
right.
started to
That's
disconnect. So now, there's something really great about a hot shower. Like, I don't know any person that doesn't get out of a really needed hot shower with
mhm.
aromatherapy, and just to stimulate your senses.
Yeah,
You feel like new sheets and new pajamas and just
yeah.
like warm fuzzy socks. These are all things that
It makes
are
me feel good just
yeah,
thinking about
so I
it.
know, like, so good. It just
Yeah,
really self-regulates your whole kind of stress level, and just curling. It makes you feel safe. I mean, that's
it
really
does.
ultimately what it's about. So for sessions too, I always make clients bring their pets in and have them sit at their feet or on them, because
That's
that will
brilliant. That's
calm
great.
people down right away. It calms you down, and it makes you
Yeah.
feel safe. And yeah, so there's little things that help in our kind of day to day, that really keep us sort of stable, and allow, even when things do come in, and we can kind of go back to those and recenter, which is nice.
Right. It's true. We don't give ourselves that self-soothing that we used to get when we were younger,
Mm-hmm.
but it's
Yeah, we're like
so
too
necessary.
tough, too tough and strong now. But the truth
Right.
is, we're not.
No, exactly. Let's
Yeah.
at least be realistic about it. It's true.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
great.
like, just like what you guys do too, that's amazing. Just, the whole like body work, and knowing that those kind of things are there to help just calm your whole system down, right? It's amazing.
Yeah.
Acupuncture and massage therapy and all of those things that kind of combined in our daily existence, and in our life as we try to deal with these stresses, really help us. So it's
Yeah.
great. I know a lot of clients love reaching out for acupuncture and massage therapy, that sort of thing. Really
Yeah,
helps them.
we need to tune up. We need a tune up and maintenance on our soul, minds, and
Yeah.
bodies.
Check in and see, yeah, what's where the stress is, and where we're holding all of that energy, and how we can sort of release it. And knowing that we can release it with someone else is huge. It's a
Yeah.
lot of time the spiral that we end up going down with our anxiety and stress is because we feel like all of these things are resting on just us,
Yeah.
just us alone. And really, that's why therapy and sessions are quite productive in that healing, is because, and obviously, like your aspect too, of just being there with someone that helps you regulate that, and knowing that they're validating what you're feeling, and they're helping you move through, which is amazing. That's
Yeah.
really priceless.
Oh, it is. It's so priceless. There's such healing in being with other people and getting that validation and knowing that, because when you're alone with your head and you're going through trauma, it
Mm.
could be a disaster.
Yeah, it's you can really start to spiral into a darker sort of reality, and like you said, your story starts to get a little skewed. But being able to, I think, vocalize even those darkest moments is really what support and counseling is about. It, because I think sometimes we're scared to say it to the people that we're closest to, our
True.
really
Such a good
dark
point. Yeah.
fears of, maybe it was my fault that the baby died, maybe it was my fault that I'm not getting pregnant because I'm a failure and my body is broken. Like, you think it, and you don't really vocalize that to someone
Right.
that's close to you. But in sessions you do, and being able to just articulate that sort of fear into words is really huge in healing. If we stay in that loop of the what ifs and the doubt in our own mind, we kind of get stuck in that space.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I've heard the phrase "monsters live in the dark." I really believe that it's true.
Mm,
It's as soon as you just release something that is on you, you just feel an immediate release. And especially, I mean, really, not with somebody that you don't trust. You have to do it with somebody, obviously, that you feel safe with. But when you
yeah.
feel safe, because that's a key point too, you can release it in, in the company of
Yes.
somebody who's not so healthy.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you do, and you get the reaction of like, oh, like just not,
Judgment
it's
or yeah.
judgment or fear. Like it just really it pushes you right back into that hole of
Yeah.
protecting yourself and not feeling safe and not wanting to share, which is, yeah, exactly. Your vulnerability is so, crushed at that point. But being able to vocalize such a deep fear and have it sort of walked through and validated and understood that it's okay to feel those and question those sort of things, then that it takes away the power of that thought,
Right.
and puts it kind of back into you
Yeah.
feeling more stable.
Without a doubt. It's so important. And I think that the work that you're doing is huge for the fertility world. I mean, it's so important to to even just come on and say it's okay. All these things are normal. For somebody to just hear that, even if they're not going through therapy, I feel like is a huge gift. Yeah, it's so important.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. I think it's important too because it helps people kind of release the shame of what they're feeling, which is like amazing when people can kind of push that away.
Yeah,
You know, as a society, the whole infertility topic and the culture is still, there's so much taboo and shame and sort of yeah, it's uncomfortable for most people still.
yeah.
Which is why awareness and keep talking about it is so important.
Absolutely. It's empowering. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
It empowers the whole journey. Just knowing that you have a whole community and a lot of professionals that are supporting you and want the best for you. And just to have that is such a gift. And so if
Mm-hmm.
somebody's listening right now and wants to reach out, how can they find you?
They can find me. There's always the website misconceptioncoach.com. Obviously, yeah, there's a direct link there. Instagram at misconception coach is kind of our main daily, all day interactive community. I don't usually interact with direct messages, but I do read them, and then I will prompt to connect via email. So yeah, just anyone that reaches out. There's people in Australia and England and all around the world. So you don't have to be kind of in one place. You can be anywhere because a wonderful technology. We just do Zoom calls in sessions.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
it's fun. Yeah, it works really, really, really well.
I'll have all of these links on the episode notes. So if anybody wants it or didn't understand how to spell it or wants to see it, it could all be found there. So thank you so much, Chiemi, for coming on. It was a real pleasure. You have such a compassionate energy, and I'm sure make so many people feel safe to talk to you. And I appreciate
thank you so much.
the work that you do. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thanks for having me.
So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.